Greetings. Today, I would like to start with a question that appears deceptively simple. What does it mean for a life to genuinely belong to you? Initially, the answer might seem clear. We tend to believe that since we are living our own lives, making our own choices, and experiencing our own journeys, the life we lead inherently belongs to us. However, when we take a moment to reflect more deeply, the question becomes less clear-cut. Many of the decisions we make are influenced long before we become aware of them. Concepts of success, status, achievement, relationships, productivity, identity, and even happiness often stem from the culture around us. We inherit beliefs from our families, institutions, workplaces, communities, and increasingly from digital spaces that subtly and persistently shape us. This is not necessarily detrimental. Human beings have always learned through imitation, engagement, and a sense of belonging. Yet, there exists a subtle tension that many individuals feel. A feeling that they are living competently, perhaps even successfully, while simultaneously feeling disconnected from something fundamental. They may be progressing rapidly, but seldom questioning their destination. They may be achieving objectives without considering whether those objectives were ever truly their own. They may find themselves surrounded by signs of success while privately questioning why true fulfillment seems out of reach. Perhaps one of the pivotal questions of contemporary life is not whether we have the freedom to choose. Perhaps it is whether we are aware of what influences our choices. For there is a distinction between merely living a life and truly inhabiting one. There exists a distinction between chasing what is readily available and seeking what holds significance. Furthermore, there is a contrast between a life that appears impressive externally and one that is profoundly experienced internally. Today, we are delving into the notion that one of the rarest forms of luxury may not be material wealth at all. It could be the experience of living in true harmony with oneself. A life where the rhythms, values, commitments, and choices arise from a place of awareness rather than imitation. A life that feels less borrowed, less performative, less reactive, and more genuinely your own. Not flawless, not optimized, simply inhabited. Thus, I would like to dedicate our time together to exploring what it means to live a life that genuinely belongs to you, why this experience seems increasingly uncommon, and why it may signify one of the most precious forms of wealth accessible in today's world. When individuals encounter the expression "a life that belongs to you," it may evoke a sense of poetry. However, upon closer inspection of contemporary existence, numerous forces vie to influence our choices. Expectations stem from family, cultural norms, educational systems, professional environments, economic conditions, social media, and a myriad of subtle pressures that dictate what is deemed desirable and how a successful life ought to be defined. What is particularly noteworthy is that these influences seldom appear to be coercive. Instead, they often seem entirely normal. They integrate seamlessly into the background of our lives. Consequently, many individuals may find themselves dedicating years to the pursuit of goals that align with cultural expectations, all the while neglecting to consider whether these aspirations truly resonate with their personal values or profound interests. From your viewpoint, what factors have contributed to the increasing difficulty for individuals to differentiate between a life that authentically belongs to them and one that has been predominantly constructed from external expectations?
I believe one reason is that human beings inherently seek belonging prior to pursuing individuality. From the very start of life, we learn through observation. We take in values, habits, ambitions, and assumptions from our surrounding environments. This process is not a defect. It is an integral part of being human. The difficulty arises when adaptation becomes so relentless that self-reflection fails to keep pace with it. An individual may become exceptionally adept at meeting expectations without ever questioning whether those expectations align with their evolving identity. Contemporary life exacerbates this challenge due to the constant nature of influence. We are not only exposed to the values of those close to us but also to countless examples of how a life ought to be lived. We witness careers being celebrated, lifestyles being admired, identities being rewarded, and definitions of success being reiterated endlessly. Over time, repetition gains authority. Something starts to feel true simply because it is familiar. What complicates this is that external expectations frequently present themselves disguised as personal desires. An individual may sincerely believe they want something, yet that desire could have been molded by years of unconscious exposure. This does not imply that our desires are untrue. It merely indicates that they warrant scrutiny. A life that truly belongs to you often commences when you cultivate curiosity about the origins of your ambitions, not with suspicion towards them, but with curiosity about them. From where did this desire originate? What does this accomplishment signify? Would it still hold significance if no one else were able to witness it? These inquiries are not ones that contemporary culture often promotes, as culture tends to focus on action rather than contemplation. However, without contemplation, it becomes challenging to discern whether we are making choices or simply persisting. At times, the most profound transformation happens when an individual understands that success and alignment do not inherently equate. A life may appear successful while simultaneously feeling oddly unfulfilled. The more profound task is to learn to identify that difference.
There appears to be a nuanced type of exhaustion that numerous individuals encounter in contemporary society. This is not solely physical fatigue, but rather a form of existential weariness. Individuals frequently articulate feelings of being busy, productive, connected, informed, and engaged, while simultaneously experiencing a peculiar sense of detachment from their own reality. I ponder whether a portion of this fatigue arises from living distanced from oneself. It may stem from the continuous need to respond to demands, opportunities, expectations, and comparisons, all while neglecting to spend adequate time in introspection. How do you interpret this subtle exhaustion? And what insights does it provide regarding the connection between attention and the ownership of one's life?
I believe that attention is one of the most neglected aspects of contemporary existence. Where attention is directed, experience ensues. And where experience ensues, life is built up. However, numerous individuals allocate vast amounts of attention to responding rather than engaging. Responding to alerts, responding to demands, responding to fads, responding to stressors, responding to possibilities. Ultimately, the entire framework of life may become externally structured. The individual remains busy, yet they seldom confront their true self. I believe this is where a specific type of exhaustion arises, not due to the challenges of life, although it can be challenging, but because the person is perpetually in motion without frequently reconnecting to the wellspring from which meaningful action derives. There exists a distinction between mere activity and genuine participation. Activity can occur automatically. Participation necessitates presence. When individuals express feelings of detachment from their lives, I often believe they are indicating a lack of participation. Their schedules are packed, their focus is consumed, yet their experiences seem oddly remote. The fatigue arises partly from managing responsibilities, and partly from upholding identities that no longer feel entirely vibrant. Moreover, as contemporary culture frequently values visibility and productivity, individuals may persist in accelerating even when disconnection is already evident. The outcome is a life that operates efficiently while feeling emotionally shallow, a life that functions but does not always resonate. Ownership is restored when attention is reclaimed, not ownership in a legal context. Ownership in an experiential context, the sensation that your life is not simply unfolding around you but is being actively engaged by you.
In your observations, what transformations begin to take place when an individual starts to reclaim ownership of their life? Not through grand reinventions or public announcements, but through a more subtle process of becoming increasingly truthful about what is significant to them and what no longer resonates with their values. What internal shifts happen prior to any observable changes manifesting externally?
The initial change is often surprisingly subtle. Individuals envision transformation as something dramatic. However, many significant shifts commence as alterations in perception. A person begins to observe. They become aware of where their energy instinctively flows. They recognize which commitments foster vitality and which lead to depletion. They discern the distinction between obligation and devotion. They identify where they feel expanded and where they feel diminished. Initially, nothing external changes. The same job may persist. The same relationships. The same responsibilities, however. The quality of attention transforms, and once attention shifts, reality starts to appear differently. Another transformation is that individuals often become less concerned with sustaining certain performances, not due to rebellion, but because maintaining unnecessary performances demands energy. When someone begins to reconnect with themselves, they frequently uncover how much effort has been expended managing perception. Gradually, some of that effort becomes superfluous. Life feels less fragmented. There is reduced internal negotiation, less explaining, less compensating, less comparison. A deeper sense of coherence begins to emerge. I believe coherence is one of the most undervalued human experiences. It is the sensation that your actions, values, decisions, and inner life are no longer diverging. That coherence fosters calm, not because uncertainty vanishes, but because conflict diminishes. And when conflict diminishes, attention becomes accessible once more. The individual is no longer expending as much energy attempting to be someone. They are investing more energy in being present.
One common assumption held by many is that a life truly belonging to oneself must starkly contrast with conventional living. However, there are individuals whose outward situations seem typical, yet they maintain a deep sense of ownership over their experiences. What are your thoughts on what people often misinterpret regarding the true essence of living authentically?
One common misconception is the idea that authenticity always necessitates visible transformation. At times, it does, however, frequently it does not. Authenticity does not inherently involve changing professions, relocating, or completely overhauling your life. It pertains to altering your relationship with your life. Two individuals can engage in the same occupation yet have vastly different experiences. One might feel confined, the other might feel in harmony. The distinction is not always outwardly visible. At times, it resides in meaning, intention, and choice. Another misconception is that authenticity is mainly about self-expression. I believe it is equally about self-awareness. Before we can articulate who we are, we must first recognize who we are. This recognition demands patience. It necessitates honesty. And occasionally, it requires facing disappointment, as certain identities we have constructed may no longer resonate as true. Authenticity is frequently less glamorous than people envision. It entails relinquishing as much as it does acquiring. Letting go of imposed ambitions, letting go of superfluous performances, letting go of identities that were beneficial at one point in life but no longer suit us. The journey is seldom dramatic. It is typically subdued, and because it is subdued, individuals often undervalue its importance, yet those subtle adjustments can profoundly change the essence of a life.
Our discussion positions this experience as a type of luxury. This term is somewhat atypical in this context, as individuals frequently link luxury with wealth, prestige, or physical comfort. However, there appears to be a different kind of wealth that arises when an individual feels authentically at ease in their own existence. What are your thoughts on why leading a life that genuinely belongs to you can evoke a sense of luxury in the most profound way?
Genuine ownership fosters a type of freedom that cannot be bought. While material comfort can enhance living conditions, it does not inherently ensure alignment. A person may have vast resources yet still feel disconnected from their own life. In contrast, an individual with relatively simple means can experience deep richness if they feel a strong connection to their way of living. I believe that true luxury is fundamentally about eliminating unnecessary friction. One of the most significant forms of friction arises from internal contradictions. This includes living in accordance with values you do not truly believe in, chasing goals that do not resonate with you, and upholding identities that no longer feel authentic. Such friction can be psychologically costly. As it begins to dissipate, a different quality of experience unfolds. There is increased ease, greater coherence, enhanced presence, heightened gratitude. and more attention available for life itself. What is perceived as luxurious is not the absence of flaws. It is the depth of intimacy, the sensation of being in a genuine relationship with your own existence. This relationship cultivates a form of wealth that often remains unseen from an external perspective. However, it transforms everything internally.
When an individual undergoes this type of alignment, what aspects become less burdensome? What weights gradually diminish as a person starts to live a life that genuinely resonates with their true self?
I believe that comparison becomes less burdensome. This is not due to the complete disappearance of comparison, but rather because it diminishes in its authority. The choices of others cease to serve as directives. Instead, they transform into mere observations. Another alleviation is the pressure to perpetually justify oneself. Numerous individuals invest years attempting to articulate their lives in ways that resonate with those around them. Ultimately, this endeavor becomes draining. A life that is truly yours does not negate relationships or responsibilities, but it lessens the reliance on universal validation. Fear also undergoes a transformation, not necessarily in its existence, but in its role. Fear no longer occupies the forefront of decision-making. It remains a component of life, yet it no longer dictates it. Perhaps most significantly, the burden of performance lightens. The relentless pursuit to appear successful, assured, impressive, or whole begins to ease. One realizes that life can be engaged with rather than controlled. And when this realization occurs, a remarkable sense of relief often follows, not because life becomes less complex, but because it becomes more authentic. And authenticity tends to alleviate unnecessary burdens.
As we conclude this discussion, I would like to pose a reflective question to our audience. If an individual were to find themselves alone this evening, contemplating whether the life they are leading genuinely belongs to them, not in terms of success or admiration, but in the sense of feeling fully engaged, what aspects might they consider? What indicators could distinguish between a life that is simply being managed and one that is truly being experienced?
I believe they may focus more on moments than on milestones, specific conversations, specific decisions, specific mornings, specific silences, instances where they feel unexpectedly engaged, instances where effort eases and involvement rises. A life that is truly yours is often unveiled through a sense of acknowledgement, not through certainty. Acknowledgement, the sensation of quietly arriving at the place you already occupy. There may also be locations where tension manifests, locations where energy is expended to uphold an image, meet an expectation, or chase after something that no longer holds significance. These tensions hold value, not because they yield answers, but because they uncover questions. And often, questions are more significant than answers. I do not believe that owning a life is a one-time achievement. It is a continuous relationship, an ongoing dialogue between who we are evolving into, and what we decide to prioritize with our focus. Perhaps the most significant lives are not those that adhere flawlessly to a plan. Perhaps they are the ones that are profoundly lived. Lives in which an individual remains alert enough to recognize themselves as they evolve, and continues to choose presence over performance.
Perhaps the most profound type of wealth is not about acquiring more. Perhaps it is about being more fully connected to what you already possess. Your attention, your experiences, your values, your relationships, your days. In a society that frequently promotes comparison, haste, and imitation, there exists something subtly revolutionary about fully engaging in your own life. Not because it sets you apart, but because it grounds you in the present. A life that genuinely belongs to you may never appear flawless from an external perspective. It may encompass uncertainty, transformation, imperfection, and unresolved inquiries. Nevertheless, it embodies a distinct type of richness. The richness of engagement, the richness of harmony, the richness of understanding that the life unfolding in front of you is not merely being watched, optimized, or acted out. It is being experienced, and perhaps that represents one of the most uncommon forms of wealth accessible to any individual.